Hello and welcome to Eastern Marshlands, coming to you live from sea, or no, from swamp to stagnant swamp, not from sea. What are you, some sort of positivist? Depression is the only thing that is real. Say hi to TK Jones, our great luchador of the working class. Hello.
Hello, everybody. How's it going?
And tonight we will be discussing a very interesting, and I would rather say even important book for today's 21st century socialism, called Towards New Socialism by Cockshott and Allin Cottrell. Finally, we managed to start this bloody live stream. While we are doing like an intro before we get into the book, please share this live stream on your Discord service where you chill out with your comrades. Let's get people in the chat. Let's start discussion going, because I believe that this sort of, it's a really hard topic and very big topic to discuss only one-on-one. And if you want to get into the discussion, please feel free to talk to us in the live chat. We'll follow every message that you write. Basically, it is a very cool book. It's really a complex book that covers all range of stuff. Basically, starting from economy, the critique of Soviet Union and Marxist-Leninist economies, the sort of like many, basically, it discusses the philosophy of democracy and what we have been doing wrong, what we should do next, and even how should we structure the everyday living in the socialist state. And I believe that it will be really crazy to discuss every single little aspect. I think on this live stream, this will basically be like we could do a marathon and do a week of just talking about this book and debating it just on one topic of communal living and that he's writing. Like we could discuss, we could fucking argue for hours on that.
Yeah, I think because this book is 13 chapters, like over 200 pages, the best way to come at it in this sort of format is to look at the ideas that we, the reader, can extrapolate from it. And that's exactly why it would be great to see people in the comments section. And I can see Spoogs in the comments section right now. Hello, Spoogs.
Hello, Spoogs. Should be discussing fourth political theory? I'm sorry, we're not that woke yet. We're still stuck on Marxism. We haven't moved beyond to a more enlightened era of fourth positionism.
Fourth positionism. We need eighth positionism already. We need to jump forward into the future. Damn it!
But yeah, by the way, fourth positionism is a legitimate thing in Russia. It's the how it's called, the basically Dugin and Pan Eurasianism. It's crazy as fuck. Let's not stick with this one. Before we move into the book, I would like to announce that we have two books that we want to read and discuss for the next one, and we are not really sure which one we should go with. And so, for the people who are listening to the podcast to it in recording, I'm sorry, we already discussed what book we will do next. It's in the description. But for people who are watching live, you can go to our Discord server. In the announcements chat, I have just posted a vote. We will be deciding between Manufacturing Consent, The Political Economy of Mass Media by Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky, or 10 Days That Shook the World by John Reed. Basically, both books are really interesting. On one side, John Reed's book is interesting because it's a 100-year anniversary of revolution, and it's a very cool discussion, cool topic to talk about. On the other hand, Noam Chomsky and his Manufacturing Consent is really relevant to us in the modern age on the rise of fascism, rise of basically radicalizing of the left and right, and sort of media we should understand how they are operating and how they're operating as the 21st century propaganda machines. And I think it's a very important book to understand that and to discuss that. So it has some nice applications to the modern world. Invite expired in the description. Give me a quick second. I'll quickly edit the thing. I think I've mistakenly like create an invite, set to 11, no inspire. So TK, can you please tell us what kind of questions, 3 questions that we discussed before, should we talk about?
Well, the 3 ideas that I could come sort of draw out from what I read of the book is, firstly, Paul talks a lot about examples of socialist economies. And from that, I could see that he was using the USSR as a basis of critique rather than a goal to work towards. So he would talk a lot about the failures of, say, the Politburo trying to, in very simple terms, trying to make 1,000 pair of trousers or pants and then forgetting to also put zippers on them.
Yeah, basically,
creating
shortages. Yeah, the shortages basically that we always hear about Soviet Union wasn't always that, oh, we don't have enough of that stuff, so it does not in the shop. You have enough stuff. It's the problem that inconvenient production and not well organized and centralized production results in shortages in the production itself, not in the distribution. So like you have enough pants, you don't have enough zippers because there have been a shortage of that, and like the line of production stops.
So the second idea from it is that technology not being a threat to. Well, this book was written, I think. When was this book written? 1993, was it?
Yeah, it's in the middle of 90s, I suppose. Let me quickly check.
Yeah. So at that point, the ideas of automation were still in the future. You had the automated production lines of, say, the car industries and whatnot, but it was still at the point where it wasn't a big threat, coming for our jobs, kind of thing. So it talks a lot about technology as the backbone of planning in the planned economy. So everything from when you clock in to clock out is computerized and recorded, all the way down to the numbers on products, essentially. So barcode numbers and product numbers, and the using them to know how much of a product is made, where it goes, how much more is needed, can we stop this production line because we've made too much, and all of that is tracked by technology and essentially getting computers into the workplace. And then the last little idea is also integrating technology into, but I've in my notes here, I've written down direct democracy, but I think Paul Cockshott really talks about less about, well, in the examples he gave, he talks about an automated machine that randomly picks people to stand for office, and he references Greece.
Yeah, I would like to interrupt you for a second to quickly iterate on this point. Basically, I believe what he's really talking about is that basically he is talking about a different approach, even philosophical approach to democracy. Basically, because what we have been using up until today and still using, we're using a Roman democratic system, Roman Republicans democratic system. And it proved to be a very problematic system. And what he's talking about, he's talking that we'll cover it. He's talking about Athenian democracy as a good starting point for structuring our democracy in the most direct way possible. This is what direct democracy is referring to. And his examples are, in many ways, attempts to take the ideas of Athenian polis and putting it in the 21st century using technology as a way to, like, jump a gap between like 1,000 people living in the city to millions of people living in all of the country. How do we apply this model that worked for 1,000 people to millions? Well, he argues we can do that using technology.
In the video you linked me as well, which I believe was recorded a little later, because he references Big Brother. Essentially, an example of quick, sudden, nationwide referendums on people being voted into office is people being voted in or out of the Big Brother house. Because, especially in Australia, when Big Brother was popular, millions of text messages were sent in to either to vote someone out of the house. And even at the time, I was thinking, wow, you could use this to decide the future of a nation, but I mean, how would you ever do that? And of course, Paul Cockshott in this book is talking, gives examples of it, especially with how different ideas of representatives being under recall at any time. Well, how do you replace them quickly enough? Well, in the information age of technology where everyone has a compared to 1993, a supercomputer in their hand, immediately you get a text notification and it says, Minister recalled, we must decide the next one. Here are your 3 options. And immediately you can vote. So already from just skimming through this book, you can start to see how you can reshape democracy itself. I guess my question is,
basically,
how would you sort of jumping ahead of the ideas here? We've skipped. I've sort of skipped to number 3, but how could you convince people that this is not only a good idea moving forward into democracy, but also how do you keep this from being abused? Because you could have someone with a phone emulator on their computer, and they could suddenly have like 10 different phones voting 100 different times for this one guy, and suddenly you've got exploitation in this system.
I would, to answer your question, I would really like to direct people to an amazing lecture Cockshott had on the Left Forum on a channel called Trade Union TV. I will link it now in the chat so people will see it, and I will have it in the description of this video. It's a long one. But there, he basically describes how this will happen, how the voting will happen. He will talk about an experiment that they had with such a system in Glasgow. And basically, in such a system, there is no possibility for abuse at all. Basically, for the very important purpose, the only way someone can vote twice in such a way if somebody actually steals your voter ID card. Basically, you get a random voter ID card as your passport, right? And there you have your unique number, which is kept secret, and your PIN, like in a cash machine, which is also kept secret. And you vote by basically putting in your number, your PIN, and as a verification that it is you, your unique number, that is your unique one, and the decision that you're making. Let's say, for example, there is a decision on something like let's take something big, starting a war, right? Starting a war against like this sort of yes or no question referendums is the first thing he's talking about.
Like even more simple
Yeah.
than that, just import tariffs.
Well, import tariffs here is like numbers. You have to decide, blah, blah, blah. Let's just take yes or no question. Let's take a question on whether you want to move a capital to another city, right? For example, Edinburgh will be deciding whether we should put in, like, for example, Scotland will be deciding, should we put a capital of our country into Glasgow because it is the biggest city, or should we live it in Edinburgh? And you will get a notification where it will basically ask you yes or no. And if you say, basically, and it says, if you say yes, this will require such and such amount of money, that will result in temporary increase of taxes at this particular, because you have to like move shit, you know, reorganize stuff. It will take some time, right? And some resources. And so I like how pessimistic Business Shop says, starting a war, smash that like button. Yeah. Basically, and you will have a notification that where will you be said, like, okay, I will have to increase my taxes for 1% for a year, right? But the capital will be moved. And I'm like, and you put your unique number. For example, it will be like 1,207,007. This is your unique citizen number, and your PIN, which is like 4589. You know, and then you put the number 1, which means I agree, and you send it. Then, when the votes have finished, you get a notification with a result, right? Who voted yes, who voted no. But there is a way to check whether there have been problems with the voting. What you have to do, like if somebody has changed the vote, basically what you do is you go to a website or you go to like a post office with a terminal, and you get a spreadsheet of every single unique number, right? There are no names. There is just the unique citizen voting number, which is 1,200,007. Blah blah blah. Yeah, and it says yes or no. Voted yes or voted no, and you can verify that your vote is put in a correct place. It is completely unhackable. The only way to hack it will be to physically attack the accounting place, which is like, it's really easy to protect it. Just don't connect it to the internet, right? Well, just don't connect this computer that does the calculations into.
Right. So I think you may have cut out there. So I'll just as you're doing that.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
It's my headphones that disconnected for a second. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got this unhackable system, and I don't say that hyperbole. It's unhackable. You have to physically assault someone to get their phone.
Yeah.
Oh, where was it? Someone said, pessimistic misanthrope in the chat said, it'd be best just to vote on each issue. That's probably like my next question with that. What exactly are we voting on?
Well, yeah.
In like the early days of this implementation, when say, for example, in Australia, the Labor Party comes with an appropriations bill. Does everyone get a copy of this appropriations bill? And instead of just going to the House, it goes to all of Australia. If we're voting on each individual issue, does that also mean when a bill comes up wanting to rename a statue or a bridge to some Australian hero who died in World War I, does everyone get to vote on that? Or are we to focus on more, say, constitutional issues like changing the flag or big, like Section 44? Should we repeal Section 44? Should the Australian people, or even people in a hypothetical country, only use this system to vote on massive, nationwide affecting issues, or should it be for anything that happens through the government?
Well, Cockshott argues for both. basically, using your example, there is no reason why there wouldn't be a referendum for any of the issues that you mentioned. Like, if there is an issue, like there is a real concern of the populace with the flag, and the people are really irritated with the Union Jack on it, right, in Australia, and they're like, "Fuck, we really don't like it. Let's like ditch it." And there is no reason why it wouldn't be put to the vote. Why? Like, yes, let's do it. It's not really expensive. It wouldn't, like, in using the current Australian system of like how you do, for example, how you did the same-sex marriage vote. That's fucking insane.
Yeah.
Sending shit to everyone, and like, if you register to vote, like, oh my god, just like, kill me now. Impossible. Using the system that we are talking about, there is really no reason why we wouldn't do it. Like, phones are really cheap, and they can be provided to everyone in the country. If somebody doesn't have one already, if you have a phone, that's it. You have a phone. That's it. And if we talk about third world countries, it is far cheaper to provide people with phones than with computers. There are other ways to do it, obviously, right? He mentions that we can implement a different system with logins, passwords, different steps of different verification steps. It is possible, but his system is raw and base, and this is what we start our like thinking with. Talking about the monetary, the money, the taxes, and all of that stuff. He also says that it should be people should be allowed to vote on that as well. Basically, if the government, which is, by the way, drafted randomly, just like in Athens, basically, random people are. Let's just say the following. Basically, there are three branches of government, right? Legislative. I don't know the English. Can you help me with that? Legislative. What else? How they're called in English?
Legislative Assembly? Legislative...
No. Three branches of government. What are they called in English? I keep forgetting English versions.
Oh, legislative, executive, and judicial.
Yes, executive and judicial. Yes. Let's start with that, basically. Thank you, Pessimistic Mr. Trope, for helping me out with that as well. So
he also did, he said it as executive, judicial, legislative, all caps.
Yes, angry fucking political philosophy teacher. So, let's start with judicial. There is no reason why there would be a judge in the fucking judicial system. Why in the fuck? Needed. What you do need is you need a random jury, a randomly drafted jury. That's it, nothing more. Like, Athens had a system that we could think about and we could use as a basis again and then discuss. Like, the city had different, like, judicial, like, basically courts, and the court was compiled of random people who were drafted from the citizenry, basically, and they worked as basically judges and collectively made decisions or made judgings on whether a person is guilty or not, and their decisions could not be like discussed anymore. It's the final decision. There is no way to appeal, right? Basically, Pessimistic Mr. Trump says judges are used because they know the law and judge the amount of the person should be judged. Basically, what Cockshott is proposing, a complete restructure of that. Because the decisions of the court are basically the decisions, the judge cannot override the decisions of the court. They still make decisions whether the prosecutor made a case or not. If a prosecutor makes a case for example, murder, and they say yes, there was murder in this case, and he has proved it, and the defendant side cannot disprove it, then what they basically say is that, okay, how bad is it, and how much they already have a like rank of years, how much they can put a guy in prison or not. You know, it's like 2 years or 10 years, from 2 to 10, for example, right? And they can make a judgment and collectively agree on how much, like how many, what should they do with that, you know? They do like the statement that people don't know the law. I'm not really sure whether they need to know the law, because it's not their job. Their job is to make a decision whether the whether the person is guilty as accused or not. So basically, this is what he argues for, and what he we can. I'm not really. So what's human perspective? If people know the law, why need a judge? Yeah, the laws are really complex. I agree with that, but I don't think it is. It is. How do I say it? It's not their job to know the law, to be honest. It's okay if they know the law, right? But it's, in this case, it is the job of a prosecutor to explain to them why someone is guilty or not. The case is not always that simple, I agree. And so this is where we can have discussions, but like, to be honest, I don't think Cockshott went really deep into that, and Athens managed to function perfectly. Mostly because their judicial system wasn't as complex as ours, in my opinion, due to the fact that. Yeah, want to say something?
I think also Paul Cockshott was focusing a little more on the economics, probably the legislative and executive in terms of economy.
Yeah.
And how the state can affect the economy, rather than the law so much. But it just goes to show that this random pool selection of a jury can be decided through technology, and that a judge as well. It isn't to say that any random person would be randomly selected for a judge. You would probably get a randomly selected judge. Probably how it is now.
Well, it depends, because there is, like, if you have a judge and a jury, there is argument to be made that it wouldn't be really fair, because an individual has its biases, a collective does not. A collective has collective biases that are shaped by the interest of the collective, which are mostly shaped by their class interests. And this is why I believe this is where we can have a giant fucking discussion on the topic. At the moment, I'm just basically presenting his ideas, because he's talking about a Fenian system. Let me quickly jump to the executive. Let me just quickly jump to the executive branch and the legislative.
This Athenian style thing brought into the modern world with technology, how would that apply to the executive level?
On the executive level, Cockshott proposes, again, a random polling of people who will be selected to be a council. Basically, he says that we need to make this position to be random to completely avoid any sort of bias, any sort of class relations or something like that. Basically, their job is not really to legislate or make judgings or decisions. They are there for enforcement of the law. And obviously, we're not saying that there shouldn't be experts who can with whom those people can consult, with whom those people can talk to about the decisions, but the decisions should always be done by those people. The only difference, basically, if there is a yes or no question, or there is, or how do I say it? Basically, all the legislative power lies in the hand of all of the people, and so what kind of this is where we come to the the last branch of the government, which is the legislative. The legislative branch should be, in his opinion, all of the people. And he argues that there are, like, basically we can say that there are two types of laws, like of laws discussion as well, two types of bills. One is a proposition and yes or no, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the propositions are created by this random committee, from what I understood. And the same is, like, every proposition is made by this committee, executive committee, right? And the judgings are made by the people. And he has a model. Cockshott proposes a model that allows to account for basically how do we vote on tax increases and funding increases if there is a contradiction between on how much people want to increase in the tax and how much do we want to increase spending on something. How do we create some sort of compromise with that? So it's a very, and he claims that there are two main things in socialism that we need to concentrate on. Basically, he says if all the experiments of socialism that we had, he concludes there are two things that we need to concentrate our minds on, that is like a must for any socialism to exist in today's world. It is two things: A, cyber planning, and B, radical democracy. Basically, wait a second. Somebody's writing. Yeah, pessimistic business joke. Good night. Thomas writes, how is society to do long-term projects if we're just picking random people for executive branch, setting up the planet with fusion power, diphon spheres, whatever, lol. Basically, what he is saying is that the people should be voted for like a set amount of time, and people will make all the judgings themselves. It's not that those people will not make decisions on how do we set up the fusion power. The people will make a decision to set up a fusion power. And
I think the random selection for the legislative branch, their decisions would extend as to far, as you said, to make the decision on whether or not to build a fusion reactor.
Mm-hmm.
If it goes ahead and all of the people of this hypothetical nation say yes, then it is the job of this legislative branch to set up a committee. And this committee would be made up of experts on fusion power, engineering, the people at the forefront of engineering, and they would sit on this committee to then build a safe fusion power reactor.
Yes.
So then when
and they respond to the executive committee, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So then when the reshuffle happens on the legislative branch, you get new ministers coming in, fresh eyes to take a look at it, but the committee stays the same. So you'll always have an expert on fusion power heading the committee on the committee for building a fusion power reactor, but the legislative branch is the one that would change.
Yes. Not as you say, executive, you mean.
Executive, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Also, the taxing, while taxes remain, while does he say the taxes remain? He claims that if we, what we call socialist surplus extraction is really undemocratic and puts the power away from the people, and people should be able to make decisions how do they deal with their own surplus democratically. Basically, they are saying that, oh, and by the way, it's talking about max tax. We're discussing, he also says the money shouldn't be at all, shouldn't exist, right? He's talking about, obviously, labor vouchers. And there is another point that we started discussing before we went live, which is a very interesting point that Cockshott is making, that we need to discuss. He's talking about complete equal pay. Basically, let me just quote from the text itself. I will tell you the page of the book so that you will be able to follow with us.
It is quite a big book. You'll have to bear with Eugene as he finds the quote.
Okay, I think I'm control Fing. So yeah, it's page 30 of the book and page 37 of the PDF, basically. Okay, let me just quote from here. Some of equal pay would not raise. Wait, it's not the point that I. Yeah. What should I? Where should I write? What should I read specifically?
So this is, of course, about. I think the common counter argument from the right, finger quotes the right, is why would anybody? I'm saying this just as you're trying to find the quote.
I'm already found it. Please make a point.
Why would anybody want to live under communism when you just everyone makes the same? So some garbage cleaner makes the same as a doctor. That's the common thing that comes up.
Yeah, like basically per hour work. Yeah, if you put out 1 hour of work, it should be judged the same as hour of skilled labor, unskilled labor, any labor. It's the same amount. Obviously, if you work more, if you produce more per hour, like how do I say it? If you put more labor in, hours of labor, you should be paid more per hours of labor. Basically, it's per hour basis. So let me quote directly. It's a big quote. I'd like you to bear with me on this one. We first examine the relationship between skill or educational level and individual payment for work. In capitalist economies, relatively skilled or educated workers are generally better paid. What are the reasons for this? To what extent do these reasons also apply in a socialist economy? One generally accepted explanation for the least part is this salary premium, that it functions as compensation for the expenses of education or training and earnings forgone. The extent of which workers in capitalist economies are responsible for the financing of their own education or training is variable, but in all cases there is an element of earnings forgone. In that people could earn more at first by going straight into employment after the completion of basic education than they received during the years of additional education. In order to generate a sufficient supply of educated labor, therefore, the more highly educated workers must be paid a premium once they move into employment. So the argument goes, how realistic is this? Is it really a sacrifice to be a student compared to, for instance, to living school and working on a building site? Compared to many working class youngsters, students have an easy time. The work is clean. It is not too demanding. There are good social facilities and a rich cultural life. Is this an experience that demands financial compensation in later life? Even if the compensation argument is an accurate reflection of reality in capitalist countries, this does not mean that professional workers should obtain the same sort of differentials in the socialist system. The costs of education and training then would be borne fully by the state. Not only would the education itself be free, as it has been in Britain, but in addition, students could receive a regular wage during a period of study. Study is a valid and socially necessary form of work. It produces skilled labor, and its output should be rewarded accordingly. So there need be no individual expense or earning loss on the part of a student from which compensation is required. The present-day society, the class system, prevents a large part of population from even reaching their full potential. Children grow up in working-class neighborhoods without even realizing the opportunities that education presents. Their careers aspirations are stunted from infancy. Many assume, with some realism, that all is open to them, is menial work, and who needs an education for that. Some of this is just reflection of the jobs that children see open to their parents, and these jobs would not themselves change if a revolution in society instituted equal pay. Equal pay would not raise the educational and cultural level of people overnight, but the democratic presumptions behind it would, over time, work in this direction. Equal pay is a moral statement. It says that one person is worth as much as any other. It says, citizens, you are all equal in the eyes of society. You may do different things, but you are no longer divided into upper and lower classes. Talk of equality of educational opportunity is hollow, and long as hard economic reality reminds you that society considers you inferior. Beyond what it buys, pay is a symbol of social status, and a leveling of pay will produce a revolution in self-esteem. Increased comfort and security for the mass of the working class people would be accompanied by a raise in their expectations for themselves and their children. If society values, this is the last. I'm just reading the whole paragraph of the thing.
So then the last paragraph.
Yeah. That's it. That's basically it.
Because we got a question in the chat.
Yes.
So
this is basically what you told. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it. I'm finished. I think that was enough for the people.
Okay. Well, the question from Libertarian Leninist Rants is complete free education or just first education free?
I think they're mentioning the complete free education. Like complete, like if the study is like, I remember he argued the same in the lecture I've mentioned on the left forum, where he basically said that why would somebody get paid more if society already paid you for, like, already allocated resources for education? Because we are talking about moneyless society, moneyless state, right? In which the accounting and in which there are only real resources and work hours. That's it. Nothing else, nothing more.
I think Paul was in that quote, that massive quote you were reading out. He also talks about how education and work go hand in hand, and that education results in skilled labor. So it would be not just free education, but paid. And it wouldn't just be high school education or industry education. It would be all education. If you were learning to become, say, a hairdresser, you'd be paid to learn to do that, because that's what you're going into, is a skilled labor. You need to know how to cut hair in order to be a hairdresser. So you'd be paid to do that, essentially.
You will be paid to learn how to do it. Yeah. Hello, can you hear me? Did I cut off?
Sorry. Thomas Tarrant is in the chat, and he says you're going to have people who are far more interested in just continuing their education ad nauseum than contributing skilled labor to society, myself included. You know, I tend to have to agree there, because in socialist societies, in a more utopian sense, there's reduced work hours, in that when a job is done, it's done. It doesn't have to be done again to perpetuate capitalism, because we're not in capitalism. We don't actually have to make a profit.
We operate on real planning, where overproduction is always also a harm, just as underproduction.
Exactly. So what do we do with all these people walking around with nothing to do? Well, there's people that have always wanted to learn how to play piano. There's people that have always wanted to learn how to be a scientist, or just read, to educate themselves by reading books and whatnot. In a capitalist society, they don't have time to do that because they have to work to pay rent. But in the kind of society that Cockshott is talking about, people who want to further their education ad nauseum can, because
there is no reason why not.
Yeah.
Like, you're still producing. This is the problem. Like, despite the fact that you are a product, right, in such a system, there is no reason for you, if you want to be like an eternal student, right? Why would you go and study something that is applicable to real world? What you are going to go to study for, you'll be studying philosophy, you'll be studying history, you'll be studying liberal arts, all of that stuff, and you'll be going for that, and you'll be attempting to do that. I don't see how you, as a person who decides to become a full theorist, will be a harm to the society. Far more than that, I believe that you will still be inclined not to just consume, but also to produce works of scientific works, works of writing, works of your analysis of something. It will still be accounted for. Like, you will be still helping the society because you'll be doing something, right? And so I believe that it's still okay for the society to keep supporting you and keep paying you a student wage. Such a system, I think you actually can do that.
A side note to this, something like this already exists, in that you have people paying through Patreon to a YouTuber to talk about the philosophy of Rick and Morty.
Oh god, yes.
Yeah, but you have a guy talking about philosophy online for everyone to see. So already we have real-world examples of
basically capitalism being able to support it. Yeah, such a thing.
Exactly.
Because he's doing it on the back of capital, basically. Yeah. People have to work to give it to them.
And yeah, as well with what Libertarian Leninist France said, I agree with Tarrant too. However, with only 4-hour work per day, one can do both. I think it could actually go even further than that. You could have 8-hour work weeks, because there's just so many people willing to work, and such a little amount of jobs that need to be done. So you could have a rolling roster of the first week of the month you're resting, and then the next week you're working, and then the week after that you're studying, and then the week after that is up to you.
Yeah.
That's how far we could go with that, because we've got, say, I think we're up to like 7.5 billion people on the planet, and there isn't that many jobs to cover it. And of course, Cockshott is saying, if we pay these people that aren't working to learn, suddenly we can start to, have a better society.
Well, I was really confused when I first heard him advocating for complete equal pay, because I understand where he's coming from, but like, my argument for unequal pay does not lie in the how do I say, it does not lie in this compensation argument that he is mentioning here. I come from, like, I'm still sticking to my unequal pay argument for reason that I believe that for the society it is far more beneficial to have as much skilled labor as possible.
So basically, so your unequal pay idea is still within the idea of a planned economy, yeah?
Yes, obviously.
But could you delve a little deeper into that and explain it?
Like, I believe that different individuals are able to produce different amount of labor during the same amount of time. Therefore, those individuals should not be paid the same. Let's start with that. If we have two workers, right, on working in a factory on the similar positions, they both are producing labor. I believe that the worker who is far more efficient in his work will be able to produce more labor than a person who is not as efficient and who's not as experienced, let's say. Experience is a good thing because experience is trackable. Experience is a thing that could be, you can see it in numbers. Like, there was a guy who just came to the factory who doesn't know shit, and there's a guy who has worked here for 10 years. Guy who has been working for 10 years knows exactly how to do his job. And I believe that he is far more beneficial to this production than the newbie. And I believe that we should really think about a system which accounts for that as well.
Wouldn't a system be put into place? I'm trying to play devil's advocate here, of course. Wouldn't a system be in place to not have these newbie workers, in that before they're put on the factory floor, they're run through everything: how to work this machine, how deep to drive in the gear here, how to oil this machine, so that they would... he still wouldn't be equal to the factory worker that's been working there for 10 years, but he wouldn't be a fish out of water just thrown on the factory floor. Wouldn't there be that sort of system implemented?
I agree, obviously, but I still believe that a guy who has done a crash course on how to run this thing and a guy who has been for 10 years will not be as good. And like Libertarian Lenin Strand says, I would think in transitionary phase, right after seizing of power, the need for unequal pay can be necessary for certain jobs in order to promote going into these jobs. For example, teachers and doctors, especially teachers. I would agree. This is what I argue. But not only that, I believe that in some ways there is a possibility to promote. I think we should promote more education. I think we should promote more educated labor, because such labor is rare.
Labor-orientated education?
No. I'm saying that you can easily find a guy who'll be able to swipe the streets, right? Because anyone can. You can't really, and in society, finding a person who is able to swipe streets is far more difficult than finding a person who is who will be a scientist or an engineer or a teacher, or a doctor. And even if you pay for education, basically when you are getting paid when you are studying, there is still a fact that society, if you look at an individual worker who will look at himself and realize that he is, like, I'm not really sure. This is the problem, because I am sort of literally creating a hierarchy where more educated people are valued more than uneducated people. And I'm not really sure how to... Intelligentsia. Maybe it's because of my intelligentsia bias, but I'd like people to... I still hold... I understand that I could have a bias now, but I still argue that society should value some labor higher than other labor, in two senses of this word. A, experience. B, how much time was dedicated to educate this person.
Do you think maybe we also need to remember the core idea of towards new socialism with not so much automation, but just integrating technology into the economy and work itself? Do you think the incentive could be that you might have to sweep the streets now, but we're going to make a machine that'll first make it easier, and then you'll never have, and then eliminate that job, so you'll never have to sweep streets again? Are we forgetting that in a profitless scientific research context, we could actually be able to automate out all of these low-paid jobs.
I agree, and I'm for that. This is what I argue for, and I believe that this is what the transitionary state then move to full communism is really about. I believe in unequal pay based on education because unskilled labor is going through a phase of automation, and in socialism, you can automate unskilled labor very well, or mechanize it, right? Like, for example, if we stick to example of street sweeping, we already have robots that are able to clean streets. For example, do you know that? Let's just say the roads. Let's just say the roads. There is no reason why we wouldn't have those giant, trucks that go and clean the roads, to have them being part of the interconnected network of how it's called, the self-driving cars, who will be just going around cleaning the streets. Therefore, we don't need people in this unskilled field. And to motivate people to go further into the continue to be part of the labor force and being productive despite the fact that their job has been taken away, I believe that educational re-education should give an ability for people to go into education, get a better job opportunity, and to go into higher paid, higher skilled labor, and motivated by paying more. Like, there is a model, by the way. There is a nice model for that, what I'm just explaining. I remember it was me and Comrade Gultsov, who is one of our patrons. Me and him were discussing it some time ago. He said that he showed me a model. I'm not really sure who is the author of the model. Maybe it was Comrade Gultsov himself. But he basically said there should be a base income, right? He was talking about, obviously, moneyless society. So we're talking about not money, but labor vouchers. Let's just say we have a job of a maintenance guy, like a maintenance guy at the school, right? So your job is go around fixing chairs and tables to make sure that they're, like, the light bulbs are in place. So nothing really complicated. You don't need special education for this kind of job. You just need basic education and a training course where, like, a guy shows you around, shows you how to do everything, right? How to manage the building. And for that, you get a basic income. If you acquire experience, your experience we should be able to track the experience of an individual worker using maybe some sort of tests that will advance you further into career, which give you a raise. You see what I mean?
Tests.
Yeah, something like that. So basically, it is clearly seen when we're talking about manufacturing jobs, where you are literally like working, and you can have a better. There is like a hierarchy of experience in manufacturing, in engineering. For example, in Soviet Union, at least, they use this system. I'm sure about that. I'm not really sure about the West. But, like, my grandfather used to be an engineer, and he was rank 5 engineer, 5 out of 6. 6 is the max one. And they had unequal pay on this regard. I believe that this system is very interesting. We should look into it. Let's say we have another job in the socialist environment. We have a doctor. A doctor has to spend how many years? 6 years in education?
Oh, yeah. At the minimum, probably.
Yeah. Let's just say 6 years. They have... basically, we have a sort of... just imagine it like a spreadsheet, right? And we have, let's say... per hour wages, a spreadsheet of per hour wages. Rank 1 is the rank of unskilled labor, so-called minimum wage in our system. And there you have, let's say, for example, in his system that he proposed, it was X is at number 1. At number 7, where it's 11 years you should have spent in education to be in the job, it's X 7 times. So doctor is 7 times more well paid than an unskilled laborer. And the biggest distance between the highest paid person in the fucking world, in this state, and the lowest person in the state should be at max, if I recall correctly, 10. So the lowest paid guy so at the moment we're talking about a difference in millions of dollars, right? Millions of times, right? In this day and age. In this system proposed by my comrade, he says that we should have, as always, like this number 10 times was proposed by democratic socialists long time ago. I remember it may have even been part of one of the early projects of Marxists. If you have any idea in the comments or in the chat, please tell me. Maybe you know what is the source of this 10 times thing. But basically, this is what he's proposing. This is your basic salary could be is based on how much years you've spent in education. If you, it's still basic. You also have a premium, which is based on how much experience you have. And so, therefore, we account for, when we determine how much a person earns 4 hours of labor, we take into account his years in education and how much he spent, how much time he was spent on educating this person, to motivate people to further their education, and experience to motivate people to further their experience. You may stay in the same job position, but if you keep improving your experience and expertise, you can move into either different position on spreadsheet, where, for example, you worked as like a worker in the factory line, you know, at the production line, and then you became an engineer based on your experience, because you can do his job because you've spent so much time, you know, do a little course here and there, and you get a new job where you get a raise, you get premium based on your experience, and therefore you keep advancing and advancing and advancing. So this is sort of system that is proposed, yeah.
So you've come to this sort of idea after reading Cockshott's idea on equal pay, of course.
No. It was before that. It was a discussion that we had like a year ago on the pay in a socialist state, and this is sort of like a counter argument that I have to Cockshott, and sort of a system that I propose in like to be used as a main system for a socialist state, not an equal.
Would you agree that the kind of technological structures outlined in Cockshott's book could they be used either for Cockshott's idea or your idea?
Obviously, because I don't think there is a way we can actually create a planned economy system without centralized planning. And by the way, if we haven't really talked a lot about the centralized planning, and he actually has an amazing argument using an example of Chilean system, and it's really interesting.
Was that Cybersyn?
Cybersyn, yeah. Basically, if people don't know, Cybersyn was a system that has been used for nearly 1 year in Chile before the coup d'etat by Pinochet.
Don't say Pinochet, or the ANCAPs will suddenly come out of nowhere on their helicopters.
Yeah. Basically, they had a system, very it was the 70s. Imagine the computers in the 70s. They had a fucking system that used to account and simulate the fucking economy without a market. And that was amazing. And it was able, yeah.
It was a system of computers in the capital that were linked to computers in as many factories as possible. And there would be a job for people in the factories to enter as much information as possible. How much they're producing, how much is getting moved, how many trucks they have, supply and demand, and it would all be sent back to the Cybersyn headquarters, and the computers would plot out and plan and calculate where things needed to go. So the
Exactly.
steel mill is starting to produce more steel. But the iron mine that's supplying it can't keep up with its quota. But Cybersyn on its own would calculate that it could transfer iron from this other place over to that mine. That's very, very simplistic, of course, and it's for illustrative purposes. But that's
Basically.
essentially what Cybersyn was.
Yeah. I think Libertarian Lenin Strand just put a link to them in a chat to
Yes.
to the video about it. Yeah, and it's an hour and 20 minutes long documentary on cybernetics and Project Cybersyn. I will put it in the video description if I don't forget about it. Thank you very much for that.
I think the strength of this centrally planned Cybersyn thing was especially shown during it's probably mentioned in the documentary, the strikes that were done by the truck drivers, I believe.
Yeah.
And Cybersyn was able to handle it all. Well,
Basically.
The strike would have been more devastating without Cybersyn.
Far more.
Cybersyn
if I
actually
recall,
managed to.
Yeah. Basically,
Sorry,
if I recall correctly, the problem was that it was a strike that was sponsored by a CIA that basically destroyed the infrastructure of Chile, because it depends completely on trucks, and trucks delivering resources from one point to another. And this strike put 80% of truck drivers into basically into a state of like sitting around. They just started to sit around and not work and doing anything, and they were paid for that. Basically, Cybersyn managed to take that 20% of trucks that remained, right, 20%, and keep the overall economy in the country going and provide, if I recall correctly, from 60 to 80% of all the resources delivered where they should have been. So fucking insane. Because the decision making was done using a system that was still made by the people. There were 7 people in the headquarters, right, who were making decisions, and they've chosen number 7 because 7 is the biggest number. That, like, psychologists say that 7 is the biggest number for a group of people to make a decision. More than that, it's chaos. Like, if you have 8 people making a decision, it's really hard. 7 is the maximum in which you can actually agree on something. And everybody would agree. So, and they made decisions based on proposals that were given by the machine, and the machine could also run the economy to test the solution and a presumed solution of a decision made by this committee. In the ideal, like, society, the plan also said that such like an HQ room should be in every individual factory, in every individual workplace, basically, and every individual region. Basically, if you have a shortage of something, right? For example, you have a problem in the factory, like there is not enough wood, for example, to produce wooden planks, the machine will start to alert the people, the committee. And by the way, it was done specifically so that the committees would have been elected from the workers who work in that factory. So we're talking about democratic control over the workplace. Basically, elected or chosen randomly. Why wouldn't we randomly choose people here, you know? Exactly. Randomly pick 7 workers who will be responsible for Cybersyn. And Cybersyn will give them information of what's up. Like, we don't have enough, like, wood. What's up? And they will be like, okay, we don't have enough wood. What should we do with it? Do we have enough wood? Do we have access to wood? Or we don't? If there is a giant fucking shortage, for example, there is a giant... like a problem in the wood production. The wood production is also notified that, like, there is not enough wood in this, you should give more wood. If the crisis is not resolved, the alert goes upward to the region-based Cybersyn. and the region-based committee makes a decision what to do. If the problem is that it's so big that even this committee cannot make a decision on what the fuck should we do, then it goes to the capital, and the capital makes a judgment. What the fuck do we do with this giant crisis that started on the lowest basis? That's how we give an ability. We basically, using this system, we guarantee workers' democracy and equal representation. We guarantee that the regions themselves could have a lot of autonomy in decision-making, in economic decision-making. And C, we guarantee that the crisis that could be started somewhere, like something small could start it somewhere in the country, it could be addressed by the capital if it is big enough, if it is actually severe enough that affects the overall planning.
So what you've described here is what's described in Towards New Socialism, yeah?
Basically, yeah. This is the Cybersyn system that is used as a base model for what Cockshott describes in Towards New Socialism.
What's your take on, say, Cockshott's critique of the USSR, essentially? Because he talks about the failures of central planning in the USSR, not in central planning itself, but the but the Soviets' attempt at it. What's your thoughts on comparing it to, say, Cybersyn, shown later in the book?
Well, I believe that it's a completely, like, it's just an amazing system compared to what Soviet Union did. Like, I remember me and Barbie talked about it, and social barbarism. He claimed that Soviet Union didn't have centrally planned economy. That's an amazing thing to say about a thing that he still claims is socialist, because he doesn't go that far to claim that it's not socialist. But he says that they didn't have centrally planned economy, because how do you describe centrally planned economy? Maybe chat will like tell me otherwise, but like I would agree with that, what he's saying. Basically, what's a centrally planned economy? A centrally planned economy is when you have a center that tells all aspects of the economy what to produce, when to produce, and how to produce. So all the aspects of the economy are not judged by the market and individual capitalists, but by a state, right? What he says Soviet Union really did is that they have chosen a sort of, a goal to reach that could have been or could not have been associated, like connected to the tasks of of the society, and they just say, okay, we pick this point, we'll attempt to reach it, and they try to reach this number, but it's not really, planned. They just basically force themselves to produce as much as possible to reach this abstract goal that they have set. And he claims that it's not really central planning per se,
So would you say it's a bad attempt at central planning? That something like Cybersyn or something what's later described in the book would be better?
I believe that
information. Sorry, you go.
Yeah, I want to say that I believe that such system used by Soviet Union is still valid, because they still managed to run the fucking economy. They still managed to function, like,
they grew themselves
so many years.
To death.
Yeah, and they managed to, they grew themselves to death. I believe that if we use cyber simulation of the economy, and we use cyber planning, which actually tells you what, when, and how to produce, when it tells you, okay, wood factory, you've produced enough wood for now. You don't need to produce any more, because you have produced the plant amount and, for example, like 20% more just in case. That's it. You can go home now.
I think that's a key thing to remember. Cockshott spoke about it in that YouTube preview video about preparing factories and whatnot for shutting down, essentially. when a factory produces a product that is no longer needed, when the Cybersyn 2.0 says we no longer need this product, we no longer need to make it, the economy needs to be able to change over. The workers that are there can't just be told to produce that product still because, for the grand glorious Soviet Union and whatnot. It has to be able to diversify and move on with the times, essentially.
I agree.
I
have
think
just posted.
I think with the using that as a basis of critique, essentially, the USSR, of course, it's very apparent that was a good attempt. Trying to emulate that sort of central planning without integrating technology and information would just result in an economy growing itself to death once again. So, of course, going forward, when I say we, I mean wherever it's attempted, you have to use technology. You have to use as much information as possible, essentially, to be ready for the shutting down of factories, for the changing economy, and the changing nature of work as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, you go.
I just wanted to quickly say that he explains, Cockshott explains the planning in the two figures that I've just posted in the chat and will be in the description. And it is the control mechanism of how the planning is occurring and how the basically what is strategic planning and how does it look like. And strategic planning is the thing I would like to mention specifically. It has strategic plans as a start, like, okay, want to produce this amount of something. Then it goes into simulation scheduling. Basically, this is the thing that Soviet Union didn't really have. Simulation. Like, you should be able to test, like, okay, if you want to produce 10 more TVs or 10,000 more TVs, how will it impact our statewide economy? It's a thing that we now can do using computers, but we couldn't do before. And I think this is one of the most important and dopest aspects of centrally planned cyber socialist economy. We can literally test whether we can support more consumer products or we can't, and we have to wait and we have to do this and that for that. We need to build another factory here. We need to build another. We need to find some more resources here or there. We need to remove here. So it's an amazing opportunity for us to actually do planning and do it democratically. That's amazing, I believe. Okay. Are we going to finish right now? You have to go, if I recall, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're gonna have to wrap this up just because of my end. I do apologize for cutting it short.
No problem. I think we covered a lot, and we raised a lot of questions, and we answered a bunch of stuff, and we introduced people to this amazing book. I recommend everybody to go into the description, look at all the links we posted there. It's a link to the book. It's a link to all the materials that we mentioned. I will compile it all when it will be up on the channel. Also, let us finish the vote. We have to announce what the next book will be. And the next book will be 10 Days That Shook the World by John Reed. Aha! Hey. And let us set the date. It will be basically a month to read the book. It will be the 10th of December. Yes, when we will have to read this book.
We will attempt to actually stick to that date as well.
Yes. And I recommend you all to also get through it. It's a very cool book. It has personal endorsement by Lenin. Now I will put the link to the book in the description. It will be in the thingy down below. Here you go. Here you go. All right, people. Thank you very much.
I just want to say, we've recently started live streaming and whatnot, and with the book club, Bolshevik Bistro, Evening with Comrades. I just want to say a special thank you to everyone that participated tonight and who participates on the Discord and whatnot, because you guys keep this going. If it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't the Eastern Marshlands wouldn't be a thing, essentially. So thank you to
thank you
every
very
single
much.
subscriber and every single person that smashes that like button.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you very much, because it's great that you're doing it. You're helping us out. We're really grateful. On this note, I'd like to say goodbye to your chat, goodbye to your listener, goodbye to you, TK.
It was
All right.
It was good fun. Good to
See you
be
in a
here.
bit. It was
Catch you
good to be
later.
here. See you in a bit. Radio silence out.